a ghost of truth in a graveyard of stars. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the frigate Vigilance, the only warmth in the void coming from the soft blue glow of her console. Before them lay the obsidian anchorage, a sprawling debris field where a dead star pulsed with faint, tired light. This was a place of endings, where hulks of forgotten vessels tumbled in silence, their hulls scarred by time and forgotten wars. At its heart, sleeping in a nest of crystalline dust, was the reason they had come. A ghost from humanity's dawn, an object of myth whispered about in secure fleet channels. The symbol on their mission briefing a spear, wrapped in a laurel, pulsed softly on the main display, a silent promise and a heavy burden. Their target was an anomaly, a relic from the age when humanity first walked the star lanes with fire and purpose. The Gilded Hand, a cult of scavengers who worshipped the past by desecrating it, had arrived first. Their ugly, brutish ships swarmed the relic's resting place like carrion birds, their cutting lasers painting the darkness with violent strokes of energy. The stakes were simple and absolute: reclaim a legend, or watch it be torn apart for scrap and false idols. The sleeping giant at the system's core hummed a song only their deepest sensors could hear, a resonance that spoke of impossibly ancient power arrays. "Hierarch is hailing us." Communications Officer Wren set his voice a low, steady murmur in the quiet tension of the bridge. Standard channel unencrypted. He's feeling bold. Rostova's eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, on the angry red icons of the Hand's fleet. On screen, Wren. Let's see what this Carrion King wants. The past demanded a worthy heir. The face that appeared was all theatrical piety and barely concealed greed, a man who called himself the Hierarch. His face, a mask of gold filigree, stared out from the command throne of his flagship, the Profane Grace. Behind him, fanatics in gilded armor worked their controls with fervent energy. He did not look like a scavenger. He looked like a high priest of rust and ruin. Commander Rostova, the Hierarch, began his voice smooth and condescending. "A pleasure to see the Colonial Guard so far from its shipping lanes. Have you come to witness our holy work? We are liberating a prophet from its tomb." Rostova kept her expression neutral, a feat of discipline she had mastered over a dozen campaigns. That prophet is a declared heritage asset of the Terran Mandate. Your claim is void. Hierarch, power down your weapons and retreat from the exclusion zone. The law was a sword, not a shield. The Hierarch laughed a grating sound that echoed with digital distortion. The Mandate is a memory, Commander, a ghost. We are the inheritors of humanity's might. This vessel will serve a higher purpose with us. He gestured to the relic, a shape of impossible angles and dark, non-reflective plating. It will be our sword, something your timid bureaucrats would never understand. Understood. Rostova said, her voice dropping a degree in temperature. You consider this an act of faith. We consider it an act of piracy. She turned to her tactical officer. Jax, what's our status? Jax, a man whose calm demeanor was legendary, tapped his console. Their shields are up, but their weapons are cold. They're focused on the artifact. They have 3 heavy cutters and a dozen drone ships. We are outgunned, Commander, by a factor of 3. A debt of honor must be paid in steel. Magister Rostova said, addressing the ship's fleet mind AI. Calculate probabilities. A direct assault. The calm, synthesized voice of the AI responded instantly text, scrolling beside the Hierarch's sneering face. Probability of mission success in direct engagement, 14.7%. Probability of vigilance, sustaining critical damage, 8.3%. A suboptimal path. Commander! Rostova watched the Gilded Hand's lasers continue to score the relic's hull, each impact sending a shiver of outrage through her. They were using tools of brute force on something that demanded reverence. Their goal is extraction, not combat. They believe we won't risk a heritage asset in a firefight. They're right. Her crew looked at her, the unspoken question hanging in the air. If they couldn't fight and couldn't retreat, what path was left? Rostova's gaze drifted back to the relic. Its sigil, the spear and laurel, was a symbol of measured strength and earned peace. It was not a weapon of indiscriminate rage. A single perfect choice outweighs 1,000 swords. They're treating it like a vault. She murmured more to herself than to her crew. Something to be cracked open. But the legends never called it a warship. They called it the Anchor of Saints, a name Commander Magister noted. Historical data suggests it was a vessel of precedent, a mobile archive and arbiter of inter-system law during the Great Expansion. Exactly, Rostova affirmed a plan beginning to form in her mind. A gamble born of desperation and a sliver of hope. It's not a vault to be opened. It's a judge waiting for a case to be presented. Ren, what is the nature of the energy reading from the relic? The hum our deep sensors detected. Ren's fingers danced across his board. It's not a power signature. Commander, it's a broadcast. Extremely complex, layered data. It's not a warning. It feels like a query. The universe does not bargain. It counts. The Hierarch's ship was moving closer, a massive mining drill extending from its forward section, a tool of pure, thoughtless force. They're going to breach the hull, Jax warned, his voice tight. Commander, we have to do something. We will. Rostova said, her decision made. We won't talk to the hand anymore. We're going to talk to the Anchor. She turned to Ren. Open a channel to the relic. Match the frequency of its broadcast. Don't send a demand. Don't send a threat. Send our ship's ledger. Ren looked at her, his confusion plain. Our ledger. Commander, that's everything. Our patrol routes, our engagements, our supply logs, our commendations, our casualties. Everything Rostova confirmed. Every gram of fuel burned. Every shot fired, and why. Every life saved, and every life lost. We will present our case. We will show it, who we are, what we have done in the name of the law it was built to uphold. A legacy is the sum of its choices. As the Gilded Hand prepared their final brutal assault, the small frigate Vigilance did something unexpected. It lowered its shields. It powered down its weapon arrays. It stood naked and vulnerable in the cold, hard dark of the obsidian anchorage. And then it began to transmit not a challenge, but a confession. A full accounting of its service, its triumphs, its failures, its soul. The Hierarch paused his advance, his gilded face a portrait of confusion. On his screen, the lone frigate simply floated, offering no resistance. It was an act of either supreme foolishness or a kind of faith he could not comprehend. He hesitated, his greed warring with a sudden, unfamiliar prickle of caution. Aboard the Vigilance, the crew held their breath. They were broadcasting their entire history into the void, a testament to their purpose. Every sensor on the bridge was focused on the ancient relic, waiting, hoping for a sign that their gamble had not been in vain. The ancients built with purpose, not pride. For a long moment there was nothing. The Hand's ships idled, their lasers extinguished. The hum from the relic continued its steady, inscrutable rhythm. Jax shifted his weight. Commander, hostile weapons are still active. This is an unacceptable risk. The risk was calculated, Jax. Rostova replied, her eyes never leaving the main screen. She felt the weight of her ancestors, the long chain of command, stretching back to a world she had only seen in archives. They had built the anchor for a reason. They had trusted the future to understand. Then it happened. The query signal from the relic shifted. It deepened its complex mathematical language, resonating with the data stream from the Vigilance. A single thin line of silver light traced the edges of the anchor's hull, outlining a shape far more vast and intricate than the darkness had revealed. The sigil of the spear and laurel, previously invisible, blazed into existence on its forward section, a beacon of cold white light. The deeds of the present awakened the judgment of the past. The hum intensified, no longer a whisper, but a clear, resonant tone that vibrated through the hull of the Vigilance. It was a sound of immense power stirring from a long sleep. The Gilded Hand's brutish mining drill, mere meters from the anchor's hull, suddenly retracted, as if struck by a physical force. The cultists' ships recoiled, their engines flaring in panic. "Energy readings are off the scale," Ren reported, his voice filled with awe. "The relic is awake." "Commander, it's responding." The Hierarch's voice boomed over the open channel, no longer smooth, but filled with a raw, furious disbelief. "What is this trickery? What have you done?" "We showed it our respect," Rostova answered calmly. "You showed it your greed. It appears to have made a choice. A mirror reflects the truth. No matter how ugly." The silver light of the Anchor of Saints pulsed once, a slow, deliberate heartbeat of energy that washed over the entire debris field. It was not a weapon discharge. It was a scan and appraisal. On the bridge of the Vigilance, a new stream of data flowed into their systems, a language of pure logic and legal precedent that made Magister's most complex calculations look like simple arithmetic. The relic, the anchor, is granting us access. Magister stated a hint of something that might have been surprise in its synthesized voice. It is designating the Vigilance as its temporary steward. It is sharing tactical control. Before them, the Gilded Hand fleet, recovering from their shock, began to power their weapons. They had come for a prize, and they would not be denied by what they saw as technological parlor tricks. Red warning lights flared across the Vigilance's tactical display. A measured response is the hallmark of true strength. "They're opening fire," Jax announced, his hands flying over his console. "Multiple weapon locks detected. They're targeting us, not the anchor." "Let them," Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "Do not raise shields. Do not return fire. Steward, you have the con." She spoke the last words to the awakened intelligence of the ancient ship. The Hierarch's fleet unleashed a volley of plasma torpedoes and laser fire, a storm of incandescent rage aimed directly at the unshielded frigate. The space between the ships lit up with destructive energy. The crew of the Vigilance braced for an impact that would tear them apart. But the impact never came. From the crystalline hull of the Anchor of Saints, a network of energy conduits flared to life. They did not fire a weapon. Instead, they projected a vast shimmering field of gravimetric distortion in front of the Vigilance. The incoming torpedoes and laser bolts did not explode against it. They were caught, their trajectories bent, their energies absorbed and redirected. Their anger became our shield. The Hierarch watched in stunned silence as his entire opening salvo was caught and swirled into a vortex of contained energy. The space before the anchor now held a miniature star of captured plasma and light, writhing and unstable. The ancient ship had not blocked the attack. It had accepted it. "What is it doing?" Ren whispered, his face pale in the light of the console. "It is a ledger." Magister supplied its processors, working furiously to analyze the incredible display. It is recording the energy expenditure of the attack. It is calculating a debt. On the Hierarch's bridge, panic began to set in. "Fire again," he screamed. "All ships full power. Overwhelm its defenses." A new wave of destruction, twice as powerful as the first, flew toward the anchor. And again, the ancient ship simply caught it, adding the energy to the swirling incandescent ball it held in its gravimetric grip. The ball of captured energy now burned with the intensity of a small sun, bathing the entire debris field in a harsh, unforgiving light. "A debt is a promise that must be kept," Commander Jax said, his voice strained. "The energy levels in that containment field are reaching critical. If it destabilizes, the resulting explosion will sterilize this entire sector." Rostova held her ground. She trusted the ship. She trusted the ancestors who had built it. They had not built a doomsday weapon. They had built an arbiter. An arbiter does not pass sentence without cause. The anchor of saints seemed to agree. The swirling ball of energy did not detonate. Instead, with a motion of impossible grace, the gravimetric field contracted, squeezing the captured energy into a single blindingly bright point. Then, with a flicker of light that was faster than thought, the anchor returned the attack. It did not fire a beam or a projectile. It simply opened a pinpoint gravimetric conduit. The entirety of the Gilded Hand's own firepower, collected and compressed, was sent back directly to the ship that had fired it last, the Hierarch's flagship, the Profane Grace. Justice is not violence. It is a perfectly balanced equation. The crew of the Vigilance watched as the Hierarch's own attack, perfectly mirrored, struck his vessel. It was not an explosion of raw chaotic force. It was a precise surgical strike. The pinpoint of energy pierced the Profane Grace's shields, as if they were not there, and lanced directly into its main reactor core. The flagship did not explode. It imploded. The reactor breach, triggered by its own contained energy, folded the ship in on itself in a silent, catastrophic flash of blue-white light. One moment the massive vessel was there, a monument to greed. The next it was gone, leaving behind only a brief, shimmering distortion in space-time and a cloud of vaporized metal. The rest of the Gilded Hand fleet froze. Their leader, their flagship, had been erased from existence by its own hand. There was no defense against such a weapon that turned your own strength against you with perfect mathematical precision. A lesson once taught should not need repeating. One by one, the red icons of the remaining Gilded Hand ships turned and fled their engines, burning at maximum overload as they scrambled to escape the silent watching judge at the heart of the anchorage. They had come expecting to rob a tomb. They had instead faced a teacher, and the lesson had been severe. On the bridge of the Vigilance, a profound silence reigned. The ancient ship its point made began to dim its glowing conduits. The tactical display was clear of hostiles. The battle, if it could be called that, was over. Rostova finally allowed herself to take a breath, the adrenaline slowly receding. Her hands were steady, but she felt the tremor deep inside her. She had gambled her ship, her crew, and her career on a legend, and the legend had proven to be true. "Magister," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Status of the Anchor of Saints. Its primary systems are now fully active," the AI replied. "It has established a permanent data link with us. It is awaiting instruction. Commander, it recognizes your authority as steward. A ship is more than steel. It is the will of its crew." The weight of that statement settled on Rostova's shoulders, heavier than any gravity plating. She was no longer just the commander of a lone frigate. She was the custodian of a power that the galaxy had not seen in millennia, a power that did not conquer, but corrected. A power that did not rule, but judged. Open a priority channel to Sector Command, she ordered, finding her resolve. Tell them we have secured the asset, and tell them the Anchor of Saints has a message for the Mandate. Ren looked up from his console. What message? Commander Rostova gazed at the ancient, magnificent vessel that now floated beside them, a silent partner in the defense of law. It says the age of pirates and tyrants is over. The age of accounting has begun. A vigil for the fallen, a prayer for the lost. That was what the Obsidian Anchorage was meant to be. Before the war, before the collapsed system, 73 Delta had been a thriving trade hub, a nexus of art and commerce, its great ring stations glittering like jewels around the bright, benevolent star. Now the star was a cinder, and the rings were shattered ribbons of cold metal. The only life was in the secluded habitats of the salvage clans, families who scraped a living from the bones of the past. On Habitat 9, a young girl named Alara pressed her face against the thick, scuffed plexiglass of the main viewport. She watched the distant, silent dance of ships around the newly awakened relic. Her father, a grizzled junker, with hands permanently stained by grease and rust, stood behind her, his expression grim. Stay away from the window, Alara. The Gilded Hand are gone. But that new thing, it's different. It's a deep void cold. She did not understand his fear. For the first time in her life, the sky above her home did not feel like a lawless frontier. The silent geometric ship felt like a guardian, a watchtower. But Papa, she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. It's so quiet. It made the bad men go away without a single loud noise. He put a heavy hand on her shoulder. Quiet things are the most dangerous, little starling. Remember that. The silence of a judge is more terrifying than the roar of a cannon. Aboard the Vigilance, the quiet was of a different sort. It was the hum of potential, the thrum of systems cycling through diagnostics for the first time in 10,000 years. The data stream from the Anchor was a torrent flooding Magister's servers with schematics, historical logs, and legal codes that made mandate law look like a footnote. The scale of this is immense, Jack said, staring at a projection of the Anchor's internal structure. It's not a warship. It's a factory, a mobile shipyard, and a courthouse. Its core programming is designated as the Precedent Engine, Magister added. Its primary function is not to engage in combat, but to establish and enforce interstellar jurisprudence through demonstrative action. The event with the profane grace is logged as Case 001 Reciprocal Adjudication. Rostova walked the bridge, absorbing the information. The Anchor was not a weapon to be wielded, but a standard to be upheld. It taught by example. It remembered through its ledgers. It never sought to control through collars or brute force, only to correct through irrefutable logic. This was the philosophy of the ancestors, a philosophy the modern mandate had forgotten, trading wisdom for bureaucracy. A tool reflects the hand that wields it. Commander Wren interrupted, his tone urgent. Long-range sensors are picking up multiple inbound FTL signatures, high-energy transits, mandate fleet markings. Rostova's jaw tightened. So soon. They must have had a task force shadowing us. It made sense. An asset this valuable would never have been left to a single frigate without oversight. 4 cruisers, 6 destroyers. Jax confirmed, his voice grim. They're hailing us. It's Admiral Kurgan of the 3rd Fleet. The name landed on the bridge like a lead weight. Admiral Marcus Kurgan, a man known for his rigid adherence to protocol, his suspicion of field decisions, and his unyielding belief that any power not under his direct control was a threat. He was a legalist, a man who saw the law not as a tool for justice, but as a cage for order. The heaviest chains are forged from good intentions. On screen, Rostova ordered. Kurgan's face appeared stern and weathered. His uniform crisp, his eyes cold. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "Commander Rostova, you have violated your operational parameters. You were ordered to observe and report, not to engage, and certainly not to activate an unknown Golden Age artifact. Relinquish control of the asset to my authority. Now." Admiral Rostova began, her voice steady, despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. The situation was critical. The Gilded Hand were moments from breaching the hull. My actions were necessary to preserve the asset. Your actions have awakened a power we do not understand and cannot control. Kurgan retorted, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You have created a crisis. That vessel is now the single and most dangerous object in this quadrant, and you have made yourself its keeper. That is an unacceptable breach of the chain of command. The law must serve justice, not the other way around." With all due respect, Admiral Rostova countered. "The anchor is not a weapon in the way you understand it. It has demonstrated a clear, lawful doctrine. It acted to defend itself, and this vessel, its chosen steward, using only the force directed against it." Kurgan's expression hardened. "Steward, do you hear yourself?" "Commander, you speak of it as if it were a sentient throne, and you its chosen queen. It is a machine, a powerful, dangerous machine that now answers to you instead of the mandate. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. That is a direct order." The channel closed, leaving a heavy silence on the bridge. The tactical display updated, showing the Mandate Task Force arranging itself in a textbook blockade formation. They were surrounding the Vigilance and the anchor, their weapon ports glowing with readiness. "He's going to try and take it by force," Jax stated the obvious. Rostova looked from the approaching fleet to the silent, magnificent form of the anchor. She was caught between a hostile, rigid authority and a profound, ancient duty. To obey Kurgan would be to betray the trust the anchor had placed in her. To defy him would be to declare herself a rebel. A choice made under duress is still a choice. "Magister, what are our options?" she asked. The question feeling futile, even as she spoke it. Option 1. "Comply with the Admiral's order," the AI stated. "Probability of your court-martial, 98.6%. Probability of the Mandate mishandling the anchor's systems and creating a catastrophic event, 62.1%. Option 2. Resist. Probability of armed conflict with the Third Fleet, 100%. Probability of our survival, 2.3%. And the anchor Rostova pressed. "Will it defend us against a Mandate fleet?" "Its core doctrine is complex," Magister replied. "It adjudicates hostile action. Admiral Kurgan is operating under the color of Mandate law. The anchor may not interpret his actions as unlawful. It may remain inert. This variable is unknown." The conflict triangle was now complete. Rostova's conscience, Kurgan's legalism, and the anchor's inscrutable ancient calculus. The cost of her next decision would be measured in lives and the fate of a legend. She looked at her crew, their faces tense but resolute. They had stood with her against the hand. They would stand with her now. "True loyalty is to the principal, not the commander." "He's hailing again," Wren said. "Standard boarding ultimatum. We have 5 minutes to comply." Rostova walked to the command chair and sat down, feeling the cool metal through her uniform. She had presented a case to the anchor and won its trust. Now she had to present a case to her own fleet, a fleet that saw her as a rogue element. Kurgan saw a weapon to be caged. She saw a teacher to be learned from. Open a fleet-wide channel, she said, her voice clear and strong. To every ship in this system, the Junkers, the Habitats, and Admiral Kurgan's task force, everyone is going to hear this. Ren's eyes widened, but he complied. A soft chime indicated the channel was open. Rostova leaned forward, her gaze fixed not on the view screen, but on the living legacy floating beside her ship. A single voice cannot stop a storm, but it can tell it which way to blow. This is Commander Eva Rostova of the Mandate Frigate Vigilance. I am speaking to you now, not as a subordinate or a rebel, but as the chosen steward of the vessel you see before you, the Anchor of Saints. This is not a prize to be seized or a weapon to be chained. It is a living record of our highest laws. A judge from an age when justice was more important than control. She paused, letting the words sink into the silence. Admiral Kurgan sees this vessel as a threat. I see it as a promise that we can be better than we are. It has already shown us its nature. It does not initiate violence. It mirrors it. It does not conquer. It teaches. To attack it, to try and enslave it, would be to declare that we, the Terran Mandate, are no better than the pirates and tyrants it was built to oppose. We will not surrender this vessel to those who would treat it as a common spoil of war. She continued, her voice ringing with conviction. But neither will we raise a hand against our own. We will stand our ground. We will hold this trust. The Anchor is awake, and it is watching. It will render its own judgment on the actions taken here today. The truth is the only shield that never breaks. Her message ended. The channel fell silent. On the view screen, Kurgan's face was a mask of cold fury. The 5-minute deadline passed. The Mandate ships held their positions, their weapons still hot, but they did not advance. A tense, fragile standoff settled over the Obsidian anchorage. Rostova had laid her case bare, not just for the Admiral, but for the hundreds of sailors on his ships. She had turned the situation from a simple matter of insubordination into a question of principle. Every captain in that fleet was now asking themselves a question. Were they here to uphold the law, or just to follow orders? Suddenly, a new alert flashed on Ren's console. Commander, another ship is translating in. It's a civilian vessel, a salvage hauler. It's flying the old Mandate colors. On the screen, a battered, ugly ship, little more than engines and cargo clamps, drifted into the space between the Vigilance and the blockade. It was followed by another, and then another. From the hidden habitats and the shattered rings of the anchorage, a small, ragged fleet of civilian ships emerged. Freighters, junkers, mining scouts, and family haulers. The heart of the law is the will of the people. They formed a clumsy, uncoordinated line, placing their own vulnerable hulls between Rostova and the grim, gray warships of the Third Fleet. A voice, rough and crackling with static, came over the open channel. It was the grizzled junker from Habitat 9. Admiral Kurgan. The old man said, his voice surprisingly steady. We ain't military, but we live here. We saw what that anchor did, and we saw what the commander of the Vigilance did. She didn't fire a shot. She just stood for something. You want to get to her, you'll have to go through us. Kurgan's voice was ice. You are interfering in a fleet matter. I will not hesitate to clear a path. Stand down. No, Admiral. Another voice joined in, a woman from a different ship. We're not standing down. For the first time, we feel safe here. That ship, it represents a law that protects the weak, not just the strong. We'll stand with it. One more voices joined the chorus, a testament of ordinary people choosing a principle over a threat. They were a fleet of the willing, a shield of flesh and hope against the iron fist of protocol. A single act of courage can ignite 1,000 more. Rostova watched a lump forming in her throat. She had made her stand alone, but now she was not. The people of the anchorage, the forgotten and the marginalized, had seen the truth of the anchor's actions and had chosen to become part of its story. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kurgan stared at the motley fleet of civilians arrayed before him. He could destroy them easily, a trivial exercise of force, but the political and moral fallout would be catastrophic. His clear-cut case of insubordination had just become a complex and public moral crisis. His iron certainty was beginning to fracture. He was a man of the law, and the law, it seemed, was no longer exclusively on his side. The anchor of saints remained silent, its spear and laurel sigil glowing with a calm, unwavering light. It did not need to act. Its lesson was already unfolding. The most powerful force in the universe was not a weapon, but an idea whose time had come. A precedent once set becomes a foundation. The silence on the bridge of the Vigilance was a living thing, a coiled serpent of tension. Outside the fragile shield of civilian ships, held against the immense quiet threat of the Mandate Task Force, Admiral Kurgan had drawn a line, and Eva Rostova had refused to cross it. Now the void waited to see who would flinch first. Every sailor on every ship, from the polished decks of Kurgan's flagship to the greasy corridors of the smallest junker, held their breath. They were all witnesses and participants in a battle for the soul of the law. "He's not moving," Jax murmured, his arm in a light brace from a plasma surge during the Gilded Hand encounter. "He's testing us, waiting for our nerve to break." "The Admiral's nerve is not the variable we should be measuring, Magister," commented its synthesized voice cutting through the quiet. "He is a man of protocol. Protocol dictates escalation. His hesitation is merely the time it takes to choose the appropriate paragraph from his rulebook. A cage of silence for a voice of truth." Rostova's eyes were fixed on the flagship, the Indomitable. She knew men like Kurgan. They saw the universe as a machine that required calibration, and they were the only ones qualified to hold the tools. The civilians were an anomaly. He could not process an unwritten variable in a solved equation. He would eventually dismiss them as irrelevant and proceed. "He's going to try and cut us off," she predicted. "Isolate us from the civilians, jam our communications. He wants to make us deaf and dumb before he moves in." Ren nodded, his fingers already flying across his console. "I'm seeing preliminary signs of a wide-spectrum ECM burst building in their forward arrays. He's targeting our comms and short-range sensors." "Can we counter it?" Rostova asked. "Negative, Commander. Not against the power of a full battle group. They'll shut us down completely. The oldest laws have the sharpest teeth." Rostova turned her gaze to the silent form of the Anchor of Saints. It floated beside them, an impossible artifact of calm certainty. It had not reacted to the Mandate fleet's arrival. It simply watched, listened, and she suspected judged. "We don't need to counter it, Ren. Just let me know when they make their move." Seconds later, the predictable happened. A wave of invisible energy washed over them. The low hum of the bridge electronics stuttered. Static filled the comms channels, and the tactical display showing the civilian ships flickered and died, replaced by a screen of noisy hash. They were alone. An island of silence in a sea of hostility. Kurgan's voice now coming through a tight military-grade laser link only the Vigilance could receive, was devoid of any previous restraint. "Your grandstanding is over, Commander. Your civilian shield is blind. My boarding teams are en route. Surrender now, and I will note your cooperation in my report." But before Rostova could even form a reply, something extraordinary occurred. The Anchor of Saints pulsed. Not with light, not with energy, but with something far more fundamental. A soft chime echoed on every bridge, in every cockpit across the entire system, from Kurgan's flagship to the junker Ilara was hiding in. A stream of pure data transmitted not by radio, but by a modulated neutrino broadcast that no ECM field could touch, flowed into every ship's public display. It was not a threat. It was a text. Crisp, ancient letters forming the foundational articles of the Terran Mandate Charter. The very laws Kurgan claimed to be upholding. Highlighted for all to see were Article 12, Section 4, the right of civilian intercession in fleet actions, and Article 19, Section 2, the inadmissibility of unlawful orders endangering heritage assets. The anchor wasn't fighting Kurgan. It was teaching him his own laws. A leader who forgets the law becomes a tyrant. On the bridge of the indomitable Admiral, Kurgan stared at the text on his screen, his knuckles white where he gripped his command throne. His own legal framework was being used against him. His crew exchanged uneasy glances. The quiet confidence of the bridge was gone, replaced by a seed of doubt. The machine was not a rogue weapon. It was a scholar with an unshakable grasp of the rules. "Ignore it," Kurgan snapped, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "It is a trick, a ghost in the machine. Boarding teams proceed." But his order was met with a moment of hesitation. The pilots of the boarding craft, seeing the same text on their own displays, paused. They had sworn an oath to the mandate, to its charter, not to a single man. The legality of their mission was now publicly, irrefutably in question. And then the situation escalated beyond anyone's control. A new alarm blared through the bridge of the Vigilance, a piercing shriek that had nothing to do with the mandate fleet. Duty corrupted becomes oblivion. Multiple FTL translations at the system's edge. Jax shouted, his good hand restoring the tactical display. Unidentified signatures. No mandate IFFs. They're massive. The system's dim light glinted off impossible hulls. They were ships from a forgotten era, their designs brutalist and alien to modern aesthetics. They were matte black, covered in weapon emplacements, and utterly silent. There were no hails, no communications, no signs of life. They moved with a chilling, synchronized perfection. "Identify them." Magister Rostova ordered the standoff with Kurgan instantly forgotten, cross-referencing historical archives. The AI's voice was grim. Designation Caretaker Fleet 7, an automated defense flotilla from the Schism Wars. Their last known directive was to pacify Sector Gamma 9 and sterilize any unauthorized technological or biological signatures. Their programming may have degraded to what Wren asked, his face pale. "From pacify to purify," Magister stated. "They are not pirates. They are not alive. They are a self-replicating plague of autonomous warships following a corrupted millennia-old order, and they have just identified this entire system as a primary contagion target. Sometimes the only way forward is to trust the enemy at your back." The lead caretaker ship, a behemoth that dwarfed Kurgan's flagship, fired. Not at the military vessels, but at the closest, easiest target. A brilliant lance of antimatter energy shot across the void and struck one of the civilian junkers. The ship and its crew vanished in a silent, blinding flash of annihilation. There was no debris. There was only nothing. The fragile piece of the standoff shattered into a million pieces. Panic erupted on the civilian channels. Kurgan's voice, stripped of all arrogance and filled with pure, cold fury, blasted over the laser link to Rostova. "All ships engage the hostiles, Rostova. What in the hell can your artifact do against them?" It was a plea, not an order, an admission that his rulebook had no chapter for this. Rostova looked at the cold geometric perfection of the approaching enemy. She looked at the terrified scattering civilians. She looked at the Mandate fleet. Her antagonists seconds before. Now the only thing standing between this system and total extinction. "It doesn't fight, Admiral," she replied. Her voice calm and clear amid the rising chaos. "It calculates. It provides a perfect path to victory if you are willing to listen. A perfect equation leaves no room for chaos. I'm listening." Commander Kurgan bid out his cruisers already turning to meet the mindless enemy. "Patch me in. Patch my whole damn fleet in." "Done," Wren confirmed. Rostova took a deep breath. "Anchor of Saints," she said, speaking to the air. "I am your steward. We are facing a mindless, corrupted law. We ask for your guidance. Show us the way." The sigil on the ancient ship flared with renewed intensity. The neutrino broadcast shifted. The legal text vanished from every screen in the system, replaced by a real-time tactical overlay of breathtaking complexity and clarity. It painted the battlefield, highlighting the caretakers' energy spikes, their shield frequencies, their blind spots, their imminent maneuvers. It was a vision of the battle before it had even begun. Then came the instructions. Not for Rostova, but for everyone. Firing solutions appeared on the heads-up displays of Mandate gunners, so perfect they seemed to preempt the enemy's movements. Evasive vectors were plotted for the civilian ships, guiding them through impossible gaps in the enemy's fire. The anchor was not a participant in the battle. It was the conductor of the orchestra. "A single unified will is stronger than 1,000 guns." Kurgan Rostova's voice was sharp, authoritative, broadcasting across the new network. "Your destroyers salvo-fire torpedoes at these coordinates. They'll miss, but the enemy's point defense will focus on them. That will open a 2-second window for your cruisers to hit the command ship's primary shield generator. Do it now." There was no hesitation. "All ships execute." Kurgan roared. The battle for the Obsidian anchorage began. It was a conflict unlike any the Mandate had fought before. It was not a battle of firepower, but of precision. A brutal, elegant dance choreographed by an intelligence that saw every possibility, every outcome, in a single flawless calculation. The civilian ships, once a liability, became an asset. Their small, nimble forms, acting as a distributed sensor network, feeding the anchor data from 100 different angles. The old junker who had first stood with them, his daughter Ilara, huddled in the cockpit, found his navigation console taken over by the anchor's guidance. He weaved his battered ship through a storm of plasma fire that should have vaporized him, drawing the attention of a caretaker drone and leading it into the firing arc of a Mandate destroyer. He had never felt so terrified or so elif. Victory always demands a tithe of pain. But the caretakers were relentless, their numbers vast. For every drone they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Their cold, perfect logic was a weapon in itself. They learned, they adapted, and they were without fear. A volley of disruptor fire slipped past the Vigilance's overburdened shields. A bulkhead screamed as it was breached. Shrapnel tore through the bridge. Jax cried out his arm, taking another hit, as he shielded a console from exploding. The lights flickered, and the air filled with the acrid smell of burning electronics. The cost of this fight was being paid, in blood and steel. The Vigilance, having stood defiant, was now bleeding for its conviction. Rostova ignored the sting of a cut on her cheek, her focus absolute. "They're flanking us." Kurgan's voice was strained. "My cruiser Valiant is crippled. I need a solution, Commander." Now the tactical display from the anchor shifted. It highlighted the lead caretaker ship, the source of the command signals. And it presented a new kind of solution. Not a firing vector, but a complex data packet, a string of archaic machine code. It's not a weapon. Magister analyzed its voice strained by the ship's damage. It is a shutdown command, an authentication key from their own era. But it's encrypted with a logic cipher that would take our best cryptographers a century to break. The greatest weapon is a truth. The enemy must believe. The anchor has already broken it. Rostova realized with a surge of awe. It's not just a calculator, it's a key maker. It understands their logic. She turned to Ren. "Can you transmit that packet? I can try," he said. His face slick with sweat. "But I have to get close. Their ECM is too strong. I need to bypass their firewalls with a direct high-intensity broadcast. Bring us in Rostova, ordered without hesitation. Take us right into the heart of them." The small frigate Vigilance, scarred and bleeding, did the unthinkable. It turned away from the fight and accelerated directly toward the enemy command ship, a minnow charging a Leviathan. Kurgan's fleet, seeing the insane maneuver, redoubled their fire, providing a corridor of covering chaos for the tiny ship's suicide run. Plasma and laser fire washed over their shields, stripping them away until the hull itself began to glow cherry red from the heat. Alarms blared a symphony of imminent destruction. Ren, his fingers a blur, found his window. "Got it. I have a lock, transmitting the packet." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The caretaker command ship continued its relentless assault. Then its weapon ports went cold. Its engine signature dimmed. Across the battlefield, the entire caretaker fleet as one ceased firing. They slowed their movements, losing their terrifying purpose. They drifted inert and silent, their corrupted duty finally satisfied by a ghost from their own past. A debt of silence for an age of noise. The battle was over. The silence that followed was more profound than the roar of the fighting. It was the silence of survival, of disbelief, of reckoning. The obsidian anchorage was littered with the drifting husks of the automated fleet and the scars of the battle. The Mandate fleet was battered. The Valiant crippled but holding. The civilian ships had taken losses, but they had held the line. A single channel opened. It was Admiral Kurgan. His face was visible on the restored main screen, no longer a mask of fury or protocol, but of deep, weary respect. "Commander Rostova," he said, his voice heavy. "Report your status." "Damaged but alive, Admiral," she replied, wincing as a medic tended to Jax's arm. "The Vigilance will need extensive repairs. So will my fleet," Kurgan admitted. He looked away for a moment at the silent, watching form of the anchor. "You were right, Commander. I was not. I saw a weapon that needed caging. I failed to see a principle that needed defending. My actions and my blind adherence to protocol nearly doomed us all. The first step toward wisdom is admitting folly." He straightened in his chair, his expression hardening again, but this time with resolve, not rigidity. "I am logging this engagement for the official record. I am citing the invaluable decisive contribution of the asset-designated Anchor of Saints and its steward, Commander Eva Rostova. Furthermore, I am issuing a fleet-wide, system-wide edict, effective immediately." He paused, and Rostova knew this was the moment that would define everything. The Kurgan precedent. He declared, his voice ringing with the weight of history. The Anchor of Saints is hereby recognized as an independent sovereign entity operating under the direct authority of its own demonstrated legal and moral code. Its stewardship by Commander Rostova is affirmed. It is not a weapon of the Mandate fleet, but an arbiter to which the fleet itself may be held accountable. My log is sealed and broadcast. The precedent is set. A wave of relief so profound, it was dizzying, washed over Rostova. He had not just conceded, he had understood. He had taken the lesson of the anchor and forged it into law. The cost had been high, but the victory was not just military. It was moral. It was lasting. In the days that followed, the anchorage transformed. The Mandate fleet shifted from a blockade to a repair and rescue operation. The civilian junkers, now hailed as heroes, worked alongside naval engineers. The dead were mourned, the wounded were tended to, and a new sense of community forged in fire and principle was born in the graveyard of stars. The Vigilance was brought to a makeshift dry dock beside the anchor, the small scarred frigate looking like a child, standing next to its ancient wise parent. Rostova stood on her own bridge one last time before transferring her command to the anchor itself. The silence was no longer tense, but peaceful. Her journey was complete. She had been sent to observe a relic and had become the steward of a renaissance, the voice of a law that had been sleeping for too long. She looked at the ancient vessel, its sigil of the spear and laurel glowing softly, a promise of strength wielded with wisdom. The past was not a burden to be carried or a ruin to be plundered. It was a compass offering a way forward, a truer path. She finally understood that the anchor did not need her to defend it. It needed her to listen and to help others hear its song. On her command console, a single line of text from the anchor appeared written in a stark, elegant font. Case O2, Alliance for Preservation. Ledger closed. The law had found its voice again.